Or should he, by the way?
Let me bring Tim in. You've been waiting patiently. Tim, your response.
Free speech is a principle. When we say that Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever platform is silencing free speech, we are not talking about the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects multiple rights, of which one of those is free speech.
In this video, Tim Pool joins the panel on Piers Morgan Uncensored. The topic of discussion in this clip are the recent changes made by Facebook to promote free speech. With that, let's watch Tim Pool demolish some dumb liberal woman about the importance of free speech in the United States.
Blatantly admitted that both Facebook and the FBI interfered in the 2020 election on the Joe Rogan Experience. And, you know, for all of the news coverage, and to some degree rightfully so, over the last 4 years about January 6th, about some of Trump's claims of the election that him and his lawyers were really never able to demonstrate at all. But how about that admission that the FBI came and told Facebook, be prepared for a Russian dump that's coming soon. And then when the laptop came out, you have 50 plus intelligence officers signing on to this letter saying that this is the Russian disinformation. And he admitted to censoring people for that. I mean, this is like blatant election interference by the FBI and one of the biggest tech companies out there. I mean, you know, I would think if you're going to reverse that, it would also come along with like an apology and some admission of what you were a part of. You know, he says he created the site to give people a voice. You robbed your fellow Americans of their voice in a very important, crucial point in American history.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was a New York Post columnist at the time that all went down with their exclusive on Hunter Biden's laptop, which turned out to be a completely genuine story, and certainly wasn't Russian disinformation. And the way that all played out was quite extraordinary and pretty terrifying to see that the New York Post.
Well, although, guys, come on, look, tech companies make mistakes the way publishing companies make.
But that wasn't a mistake, Carol, was it? I mean, it wasn't. Well,
you know, no,
they actually. Hang on. Hang on. My point. They actually banned the New York Post X account completely. Completely.
Yes, they did.
If they didn't take down their true story. I mean, that is the most blatant attack on free speech I've ever seen.
It's not free speech. It's not a government institution. Companies do that. Disney didn't put out a movie in China because the Chinese.
It doesn't make it right, though, does it?
Of course not. But it's not, you're equating Facebook. You're equating Facebook.
I'm looking forward to seeing where this woman is going with what she's about to say. There's always talk about rigging of the 2020 election, and while we've seen a lot of cases in various counties or states of extremely suspicious activity during that time, like ballot dumps, dead people voting, etc. There's never really been definitive proof, especially, you know, in all the court cases that Donald Trump's team brought after the 2020 election that said unequivocally that the votes were manipulated and Joe Biden didn't actually win. However, it depends on what you personally classify under the term rigged. But what is indisputable is that Facebook and the FBI interfered in the 2020 election. And there are zero repercussions for it. All of the stuff you see on mainstream news media about Donald Trump and how bad he is and Russia collusion, I'd be really curious to see how many networks have done a story, if any, on the effect that Facebook and the FBI had on the 2020 election? Because I sure don't see it getting much coverage. Isn't that a huge news story? The fact that the FBI and the largest tech company, or one of the largest tech companies on the planet with unbelievable power and influence, colluded to suppress true information that voters needed to make a decision. I've mentioned this before, but exit polling showed that when Biden voters were asked if you had known prior to the election that the Hunter Biden laptop story was true, would you have voted for Joe Biden? And they said no at an overwhelming percentage. I mean, when the New York Post got banned over the Hunter Biden laptop story, that should have been a signal to anybody who was skeptical, not that the New York Post was doing something wrong, but something was shady going on with Facebook. And at that time, people probably didn't know the FBI was involved or to what extent, but that should have been a red flag. I certainly don't jump on the bandwagon with stories when they come out until I see enough information that allows me to make a decision. But I remember very early on through Fox News's coverage that it was pretty unlikely that this was a made up thing. If it was made up, it was the most convoluted, made up story you'd ever heard. You know, the guy buying a laptop at a used or a pawn shop or something like that, or a used laptop or a computer store, and then it just happens to be Hunter Biden's. Anyway, getting back to my point, let me know in the comments, does the FBI colluding with Facebook to suppress a major negative story about one of the candidates qualify as quote unquote rigging? I know it's interference, but because this is YouTube, I'm going to hold my opinion on that one. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
Facebook or Twitter with the government. It is not a public square.
No,
It
no,
is
I'm
a
not.
private
No,
square
I'm not.
To be
I'm
very
owned by
clear,
billionaires.
I certainly was not. Listen,
No.
I was not equating Facebook and the FBI, and I think it is reasonable to point out that a lot of these big tech companies were under duress really since Donald Trump won in 2016. All the heads were hauled in front of Congress and threatened up and down if they didn't get this misinformation problem under control. But is the claim here that those intelligence officers made a mistake and really thought this was Russian
no. Here's what I'm
disinformation
saying
and
is
then
our
realized it
government-
was Hunter Biden's laptop?
Our government should be talking. Go ahead.
Tim, no, let Cara finish her point, then I'll bring you in, Tim.
The government should constantly be talking to lots of companies because there are disinformation campaigns from Iran, Russia. You can't pretend that China's not all up in our grill. You just can't. You just can't. And there should be discussions between government and companies. They're going to occur. By the way, they've been occurring since the beginning of time, way back when. Go watch Oppenheimer. There's discussions happening all the time on all levels between companies. The question is, what is pressure and what is important discussions that these companies, because they are at the nexus of all these information systems, should be having, and what are the guardrails against government overreaching? I am all for stopping government overreach. I did a great interview with Edward Snowden about this issue. Perhaps the way he did it wasn't right, but what the government was doing was wrong. They fixed it. There should be guardrails around these things. The question is how it's done. But what happens is there's a fever dream on the left and a fever dream on the right of what's occurring, and it's a little less nefarious. I think that Facebook, unfortunately, occupies a far too important role in news distribution as a kind of a monopoly. And that's the problem we have going forward. It's a private company that's determining what everybody sees. And
if you like watching videos like this one, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
They're going to not just make mistakes. We're at the behest of Mark Zuckerberg's obviously incompetent ability to decide what's right and wrong. Or should he, by the way?
Let me bring Tim in. You've been waiting patiently. Tim, your response.
Free speech is a principle. When we say that Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever platform is silencing free speech, we are not talking about the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects multiple rights, of which one of those is free speech. So this constant conflation of a private company isn't violating your First Amendment. I'm not going to bring up the First Amendment. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to go on a platform, I'm going to express my ideas and share news, and if they silence me, they are violating my free speech. Now, more importantly, this argument about, you mentioned there's a fever dream on the left and the right. I want to make one thing clear. Mark Zuckerberg coming out and saying that now we're going to have more free speech or whatever it is he's trying to say, this is not a pendulum swing. This is not the weather vane. Certainly, I do believe the man is just bending the knee to whatever power structure he sees. But if we were actually going to see a pendulum swing in the other direction, they would keep the fact-checking program, ban the liberal news outlets, and only allow conservative outlets to fact-check posts on Facebook. When you look at all sides, when you look at ground news, the majority of U.S. fact-checkers had a liberal bias and only...
I really like where Tim's going with this. I had taken a note here while I was listening to this, and it said, I don't think the right on this topic has a fever dream about anything. Right-wing voices were being suppressed. Now, on X, for example, Elon Musk has done a lot to open it up to free speech for everyone. It's bananas that the left wing complains about X now. I really actually am blown away at their, I don't know what the word is, immaturity, pearl clutching, outrage that, God forbid, the platform be opened up to free speech. If there is a party of suppression of speech, it is the left wing. Make no bones about it. They want nothing more than to have control of these social media platforms and to suppress the speech they don't like. And that's why they were content when on Facebook and previously on X. What Tim just said, that's why they're excited about what Tim just said, which is it's a known fact that the vast majority of the quote unquote fact checkers, I hate that term because it's like who is all knowing enough to be a fact checker? It's so dumb. But they all had liberal bias. And that's what the left wants to get back to. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
One, which was associated with the Daily Caller, was considered to be conservative-leaning. And when numerous outlets on the right made attempts to get access through Pointer to the fact-checking system, they were denied that. So now, once again, what do we see? Real quick, too, another point. Back to the First Amendment issue. I just want to add, the government had backdoors into X and Facebook where we actually got to click the link and go to the login portal for the federal government to go into Facebook to flag posts. And there was an instance where if you said the name Eric Charamella on YouTube or Facebook, your post would be inexplicably deleted. And everybody knew that was happening. And this is Real Clear Politics that it broke the reporting on Eric Charamella. So what we're looking at since Elon took over Twitter and turned it into X, we have consistently seen a dominant liberal or Democrat party bias on these platforms. And when the problem is, quote unquote, resolved, you get neutrality. There's been no circumstance where we have seen a right bias or a conservative bias or a pendulum swing in the other direction. So Mark Zuckerberg right now is declaring neutrality. He's not actually swearing fealty or kissing the pinky ring of Trump.
Well, fascinating.
Regardless of what you think of Tim Pool, I know some people don't like him. That was a spot-on analysis. I totally forgot about the fact that the government had access via backdoor portals to Facebook and Twitter to flag posts or delete posts. That is just insane. Like I said, that's not even a blip on the radar as far as election interference or really any kind of wrongdoing from the mainstream media. Again, maybe there are stories out there, but I promise it was not covered ad nauseum like anything that the right wing does or a narrative they're trying to push about the right wing. But we want to hear from you. What do you think about this conversation about free speech and especially what Tim Pool had to say versus what the other panelists had to say? Let us know. Anyway, as always, we really appreciate you watching, and we will see you on the next one.